panel the discussion, an objective and impartial view of the issues of interest to you. Nation Beat is on now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our discussion this morning on adaptive social protection. Thank you all for agreeing to be here. I am looking forward to our talk. It is important to all of us as practitioners and to the ministry that we mainstream adaptive social protection and we showcase it so that everyone becomes aware of the work that is being done by the ministry, partner agencies, the donor community. So I really hope that we could share our experience and our expertise with our listening audience so that we could get the message out there on adaptive social protection. Everyone knows that the Ministry of Equity is responsible for social protection services in St. Lucia. And we have come a long way in strengthening traditional social protection services. Now we are going on to mainstreaming and adopting a formal framework for adaptive social protection. I know a lot of changes have taken place at the ministry. So Ms. Toussaint, can you share with us what do you think this progress means for the ministry and how you as a senior practitioner receive these changes?
Thank you very much. It has been a long road, and I mean it all started in 2012 when the ministry assumed that portfolio in terms of social protection. At the time it wasn't really coined social protection, but persons would probably know a lot about the social safety net reform initiatives and some of the things that we did. So receiving, especially from the cash transfer standpoint, the PAP, the Public Assistance Program, what we have found is how it is that we were able to develop that program from 2012. And then moving along in 2014, we had an addition to that, which is the Child Disability Grant. And then further work on legislation and technical notes in terms of guiding and shaping the landscape for social protection in St. Lucia. So it has been slow, thorough, deliberate, and of course, if you're doing anything for the very first time, you would actually be very particular and meticulous in terms of how it is that you define and design your infrastructure so that it can adapt to whatever situation that it finds itself. So that is how. So I think personally from the ministry as a senior officer, I think it has taught us a lot. We've learned many lessons along the way. And of course, we've had the opportunity to improve quite a bit, which I guess in our discussion this morning, we will learn a little more about.
Okay, so you would agree that the system has indeed been strengthened?
It has been strengthened in numerous ways, All
right. And Mr. Kadey, former PS of the ministry and continued practitioner in social protection and evidence-based policy, how would you describe this progress for St. Lucia, knowing that this work was part of your brainchild, I would say? And what do you think the ministry will benefit, how the ministry will benefit from mainstreaming adaptive shock response and social protection?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So I used to be the Deputy PS of the Ministry of Equity. I want to begin by saying that a quiet revolution, I think, has taken place or is taking place with respect to social protection in St. Lucia. It's a quiet revolution that started somewhere around 2011, as Ms. Toussaint would have said, and continues today. First of all, we had reforms. We had some major achievements back in the early days of that revolution. That included the adoption of the SLNet, which was a more scientific way of targeting persons for enrollment onto some of our social safety net programs, key among which was the public assistance program. This was a major accomplishment of the reform because it meant that we were able to target households with a greater level of accuracy. Prior to that, the targeting was subjective. It was done on the referral of social workers. And there were issues with errors of omission, persons who were, or exclusion, persons who may have had to be on the program who were excluded because of the issues with the targeting method. And there were also persons who probably should not have been on the program who were enrolled. So the advent of a more scientific approach to targeting was a major achievement, an early win for St. Lucia in the social safety net reform program. There was also the advent of the social protection policy, which I had the privilege of contributing to quite a lot, having spearheaded the first draft of that policy. This was a major accomplishment as well, because it allowed St. Lucia to develop a definitive position on social protection in St. Lucia, where it stands and so on. And a key component of the policy was the adoption of a transformative paradigm. So an approach to social protection that looked not solely at the protective components, like providing assistance to persons to improve their consumption, but also looked at other aspects like how to assist persons in building the capacity to participate in the labor market and to earn their livelihoods with dignity and pride, and how to also preventive social protection, how to prevent poverty in the future, a kind of life cycle consideration by subscribing to social insurance and the NIC, for instance, contribution to the NIC. But perhaps most importantly, looking at also improving people's access, the access of the poor and the vulnerable to important social services, that would help them to come out of poverty. So these were very notable achievements. Also, we began to take on board the need for social protection to be more child sensitive. So child sensitivity and also gender sensitivity was another very important aspect of these early days of the reform. As Ms. Toussaint has indicated, we also saw the coming on stream of the Child Disability Grant. This was a pioneering initiative, because never before did we have such assistance for disabled children or children with disabilities in St. Lucia. We saw also increases in the allotment for public assistance, the allocation and the benefits to the poor became a little more generous. So that was another achievement. We gravitated also towards household targeting as opposed to individual targeting, allowing us to have a more holistic idea of the household circumstances of the poor, the circumstances within the household, and to adopt a more holistic approach, which continues in some of the more recent aspects of the reform. Multidimensional poverty was another very critical one, looking at poverty not just as an inadequacy of income, but also the existence of certain deprivations, educational deprivations, health deprivations, housing deprivations, and so on. So this was major, and along with it came also the change in the way we measure poverty. Okay, not merely by the the monetary measure or metric, but also looking at some of the deprivations that I alluded to. The World Bank, UNICEF, UN Women, and other agencies must come in for great praise in this initiative. The Caribbean Development Bank, very great praise. Many of the reforms that we spearheaded, reform initiatives we spearheaded, were tied to concessional lending by agencies like the World Bank. And the disbursements, therefore, were conditioned upon the completion of certain key aspects of the reform. And that in itself provided a commitment mechanism for us as a country to pursue these reforms. So not only did they provide some concessional finance and technical support, but also that very important commitment mechanism for the reform. More recently, we've seen improvements in terms of the appeals mechanisms for the program. That's very worthy of note. We must ensure that persons, especially those who are being turned down for assistance, have some avenue for appeal to ensure that we reduce on errors of exclusion. There's been improvements of late also in the verification mechanisms. And a notable, and that will be my final point on this question, a notable development has been the advent of the civil society platform, I think it's called.
Yes.
Yes. It's a very notable development, and one that we spoke to very early, but only materialized now. It has, shown that we understand that social protection does not reside only in the realm of, social protection provision and administration only within the realm of government, but there are some civil society organizations out there that are doing very important social protection work. And we are accountable, in addition to that, we are accountable to them and to the public in terms of our efforts as social protections.
Thank you. So we have a national social protection policy, the updated one, which should be implemented from 2022 to 2030, with the tagline, delivering care, assuring dignity, and building resilience. And it defines social protection as social risk management, which the two of you have captured well, talking about the many initiatives from the social safety net reform, expansions in the PAP transfer and with the CDG. And we agree that we have been improving our capacity for social risk management. But we have also been informally and more so formally involved in disaster risk management. And the framework of adaptive social protection we have welcomed to allow us to present the ministry as a key player in being responsive to persons, not only when they suffer social risks or threats, but other risks, other shocks. And so I take it that the ministry has embraced ASP, Adaptive Shock Response to Social Protection, but a lot of people will need to understand why it is the ministry's business, and they do not know that the ministry has a long history of collaborating with Red Cross, NEMO, and other partners providing shock response. So Ms. Donnelly, as an STO who's been with the ministry for a while now, can you share with us your experience of disaster response from the ministry's standpoint, and what do you think the improvements now that we have this strengthened framework will look like for you?
Okay, so in the past, first of all, St. Lucia is a country prone to disaster. We know this. Hurricanes, flooding, landslides, those types of disasters affect us very frequently. And unfortunately, with the composition of the country, with the physical structure of the country, anytime we're hit with one of those major disasters like Thomas in 2010 and I think it was 2021 more recently we had Elsa. Yes. You know, you find that efforts to do damage assessments, your initial damage assessments, and getting data on who is affected, how they're affected, getting the responses out after a disaster has been very challenging. What adaptive social protection does is it strengthens our ability to get the help to those who need it quicker, because we would have already had lists compiled of who our vulnerable people were before a disaster. Now, you can imagine if you had families and individuals being vulnerable prior to a disaster, they would become more vulnerable after a disaster. And so we didn't have to wait to say, okay, Tanzia is most likely affected, you know. We would already know that she was in a position of vulnerability, and so that assistance could get to her even quicker. So the mechanisms now to make those families more resilient is now there. Adaptive social protection also takes care of the issues that we don't see post-disaster. We can see broken roads and we can see damaged buildings, but we cannot see unemployment. We cannot see joblessness. You know, we don't see the families who lose their livelihoods due to a landslide which took away their entire crop. So, having been on the front lines of disaster response as a NEMO volunteer, as a national volunteer, I can tell you that in real time, it makes an actual difference to the people and the families who are affected.
So, Ms. Toussaint, can you expand on how the ministry prioritizes responses to its beneficiaries in times of shock and share any recent experiences?
Well, yes, we have at the ministry recent experiences, and I think one of the partners that stands out in all of this is WFP, and thank you, Lilia, and the WFP team for always being there and for always being able to actually assist the ministry in those times, especially in times of disaster response. So through that initiative with the ministry, and I think Lilia is here to speak to that as well, we're looking at adaptive shock response. But before, I won't steal Lilia's thunder. I think what we can say is in terms of the income support, and what WFP has done, and even not looking at a different way. In COVID-19,
Right. Yes.
Some of the responses we got for COVID-19, direct response to our beneficiaries and the children and the families were in terms of hygiene packages and food and all of those kinds of support. But even also, apart from WFP, we've also had CDB coming on board in terms of the cash, the income support system services that they offered and they provided during those times of disaster. So all of these are well coordinated, because I think Mr. Kade alluded to it earlier in terms of some of the strides that we've made with adapting and adjusting our tools. The machinery that guides that process and that facilitates the data capture and collection. These are very, very significant to the ministry, because it enables us to actually focus more and be a little more targeted and strategic in terms of reaching the poorest of the poor or the most vulnerable amongst us. So I could safely say that we have had some very good experiences in doing that. They have been tedious,
Yes.
I must say, because they take a lot of resources and a lot of energy. And of course, with our limited human resource capacity, sometimes it could seem like forever that we're not getting to that point. But I think nonetheless, we can safely say that these are very well appreciated. And like I said, Lydia, thanks to WFP, because even in terms of the data, they were consistent with the data during COVID-19 in terms of providing updates and doing research to actually show what the impact has been and what areas that needed some of our attention.
Yes. So from Thomas to COVID, the ministry has been strengthened to respond to shocks. And we have partners not just in NEMO and the Red Cross, but we also have in the donor community with CDB and of course with WFP. And Lilia is here with us to tell us how WFP went from being an organization you would think of as out there to feed the poor, to providing so much technical support to strengthen a framework for mainstreaming adaptive shock response with social protection. Please share your experience with the ministry and what is the agenda for us? What should we be looking forward to for shock response with social protection in St. Lucia with the WFP?
Well, thank you, Juliana, and thank you, Tanzia, for all the commendation. I will be sure to pass it to our team in Barbados. But as you said, WFP is known globally for providing emergency food aid. But we have recognized that hunger is not only about providing food. It's also about addressing the vulnerabilities that persons experience, and a lot of it for small island developing states like St. Lucia has to do with climate impacts, economic crises, and of course effects of pandemic like COVID-19. So having recognized that, the World Food Programme has gradually been embracing the whole concept of adaptive social protection. And what that entails is to integrate the whole disaster risk management concept into the social protection systems. And thereby you strengthen the national systems of the government to be better able to prepare, respond to emergencies, but you're doing this through the government systems, through the established systems. So we're not coming to establish anything new. We are working with your systems, helping you strengthen it. And Tanzia would have mentioned the whole aspect of providing data, evidence-based data collection. We're providing training, we're providing tools, and all that is to help your national systems get stronger so you are better able to deliver to your persons in need. And when we think about responding to natural disasters, we're not talking about the immediate. Yes, you need food. Yes, you need housing, but in the weeks leading, some persons may lose their homes, they may lose their livelihoods, and that support that adaptive social protection or shock responsive social protection encompasses is to provide that longer term support so you can help persons better recover from the natural disasters. And WFP has been partnering with the government of St. Lucia from 2020, I believe, and we will continue to partner with the government of St. Lucia to help strengthen the systems.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate all the transfers and the capacity building. Yes. And it keeps, as Ms. Susan said, keeps the ministry very busy. A lot of training for the staff, the human resource. So we've had most recently income support for persons affected by COVID. WFP assisted with ensuring that the PAP cash transfer grant was made during COVID to the affected persons. And even recently we had the November 6th flood event in Corinth area. The ministry was also very busy during that time. So I think we have agreed that the capacity for delivering services in times of shock of the ministry is challenged, it's stretched, but it has been strengthened simultaneously. And we are thankful for everyone there, all hands on deck scenario when it is called upon to deliver. And I could say we look forward to strengthening those partnerships that we've been discussing. So I would invite you to share with us at this point, what do you think would be the priority for the ministry right in the next 5 years, as the ministry aims to achieve or to demonstrate that the system is indeed strengthened and we are pursuing Agenda 2030 and achieving the goals on the strengthened social protection system and improve services to the poor and the vulnerable. Ms. Toussaint?
You started with me. Okay, there's a lot. There's a lot I think we need to grapple with, but I think foremost, everything falls in is aligned in a very strategic way. We know that we have a period between June to November of every year where we experience different weather systems. However, what we should be focused on is, with the help of WFP and in terms of where we're leading in terms of shock response, is to actually ensure that these things are rolled out in a very systematic way. So that what do we do? Do we do training in the first quarter of every year, and then we roll it out in terms of when we get to June, how it is that we actually put into play our anticipatory action and roll it, how we roll it off as well, so that we know every year these things will be occurring, but at a different speed and a different phase to every year. So this year we know, the upcoming year 2025, we know how it's going to be done. We prepare our staff at the beginning of the year so that when June gets there, we are well equipped to actually deliver in the event of a disaster. And then thereafter, what do we do when we rebuild? So after November, what do we do? How do we prepare again for the next year and the next season? So I think the response it's already in motion. And now it means crystallizing and fine-tuning and institutionalizing at the pace that we need to, and the places where we need to.
You said something interesting, Mr. Kade. You care to shed light on when we experience, when we are tested and tried, how should our planning mechanisms change to adapt so that we come back better to deliver, stronger to deliver in the next cycle of response?
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I think, there is a lot that I can say about this new thrust towards adaptive social protection. It's a laudable initiative, a policy, because it just continues this effort to make social protection more responsive to the needs of the citizens. Okay, St. Lucia is a small, vulnerable island state. Our main economic drivers are tourism and agriculture, and they are very vulnerable sectors or industries. Okay, we have the lessons from COVID, the hurricanes, and so on and so forth. And I think it is very important that we can take on board this adaptive approach. There is even an economic argument, I think, to be made for that. If we can, restore persons to a level of productivity, it is good for the economic fortunes of the country. But also very, very importantly, we need to realize that reducing poverty is not just about pulling people out of poverty, but it's also about ensuring that those who are not poor do not fall into poverty, particularly the vulnerable who are most likely to have that happen to them. So the onset of a shock can do exactly that. It could cause persons to fall into poverty and so on. But to answer your question more frontally, I think I want to say that the key to moving forward with respect to learning lessons and improving would have to be M&E, okay, monitoring and evaluation. And I suppose to some extent that's why
You
I am here. Okay, it is very, very important that we're able to monitor our actions, okay, our activities, and evaluate our performance, okay, in terms of our activities, but even more importantly, in terms of the results that we are getting from our activities. Okay, so the need for proper monitoring and evaluation of our activities, and more importantly, the results that we are getting from these activities in terms of the outcomes of our activities and the impacts we're having. These are very important. Okay, so with this capacity built into our programs, we would be able to generate very important information that we would learn from, and that would allow us to improve our practice. Okay, so monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Learning from, you know, the information that we have gathered concerning our performance and the results.
Yes, so we have our targeting tools, and we have the vulnerability risk index. What can we look forward to from WFP to ensure that we have the data, we have the targeting tools strengthened, so that we could understand how persons are affected better?
Okay, thank you. So maybe I should just backtrack a bit. You talk about the vulnerability index, and that is a tool WFP supported the ministry in developing, and the whole point of the tool is to identify persons who are susceptible to hazards. So the ministry has its regular client base that they support every month under the different social protection programs, but then we would understand that persons become vulnerable because of where they live, perhaps, or the type of houses they have. So they may not be considered vulnerable under the regular system, but when you assess their vulnerability due to hazards, maybe they're located in a flood zone or near an area that's prone to landslide, they do become vulnerable, and if a hurricane hits, then in that instance they would need some assistance. So that vulnerability index helps identify those persons before they are exposed to a natural hazard. And in that way, the ministry can strengthen its systems. You identify the persons, you know where they are, where they live, and you can formulate programs to help strengthen them. So we have supported the ministry in doing that, and that is something we will continue to do in terms of expanding that vulnerability index to further test it. Danielle had mentioned that we tested that in after Hurricane Elsa. We tested, we provided some cash transfers to persons affected after Hurricane Elsa, using that vulnerability index to identify persons. And we also tested digital payments because we understand that after a hurricane, the systems don't work as they should. So the banks may be closed, so persons would need cash. But if you receive those on your mobile phone, that allows you to access services. So we will continue to pilot those things with the Ministry of Equity. We have also succeeded in integrating disaster risk financing into the social protection system. So two of the key things that I want to highlight that we are working with the ministry with and that we will continue to support. One is the support to the risk insurance facility, the CRIF that St. Lucia purchases hurricane insurance. So we would recognize that if St. Lucia is hit by a hurricane and the government of St. Lucia receives money from that insurance facility, the priority is to get the economy running. You need to fix the roads, the bridges, the schools. You need to repair the agriculture sector, the tourism sector. So there's not a lot of money left to help the persons individually who have been affected. But by topping up that insurance premium, we can ensure that the Ministry of Equity gets funds directly to support persons who have been in fact impacted by those hurricanes. And we are also looking at proactive measures. We call it anticipatory action, but it's a preemptive action. By using the vulnerability index, you identify the persons that need the support, and you can provide them with that support before a hurricane strikes. And just to highlight that all of this is not done with the ministry alone. It involves a lot of interagency collaboration. So we have been able to partner with the Ministry of Finance, with the Met Services, to get those systems organized. So in the event that St. Lucia is hit by a hurricane, then the systems are strengthened, the Ministry of Equity is better able to deliver, and the government of St. Lucia can actually have access to additional funding to be able to support the vulnerable people.
So we have the frameworks, we have the policy, we have the procedures, we have the partners, and it is important that our persons on the ground, our STOs, when they see you, they know that they are assured that the ministry is responding, is responsive, and you are applying the tools on the ground, you are making sure the data is available. But the waiting period, how do you interact with the public during the waiting period as a face for the Ministry of Field Worker? So do you see challenges there for you?
I mean, everything has its challenges. However, thanks to WFP and thanks to a lot of our donor agencies who have been continuous in their provision of technical support, provision of capacity building and training for us as social transformation officers, we've been able to interact with the community in ways that we're constantly on the ground, we're constantly interfacing with them. So it's never an issue where they feel neglected or left out. We are the bridge, basically, between the community and the services that the government offers. And we have been constantly improving and assuring our communities through our interactions with community groups, through our provision of support for them, that we're always there. And I really like the fact that Ms. Tuse and Mr. Kade touched on the data, because we are becoming more data-driven. This is something that we lamented in the past, that St. Lucia doesn't collect enough data. So the social transformation officers as well, we are charged with the responsibility of like community profiles, for example, generating community profiles and ensuring that we know what is what in our community. So when issues arise, when disasters strike, and not just natural disasters, we're talking things like COVID, you know, because something like this can happen again, that we know our communities and where are the hotspots, who is most likely to be affected. So all of that, every department, I can say with confidence, in our ministry has been doing its part to strengthen adaptive social protection and to ensure that we are the mechanisms that our departments are responsible for are in place and are working.
Thank you. So this was insightful. Thank you very much. I trust that you feel satisfied with your sharing, and I am comfortable with closing now, based on your smiles. I don't see anybody eager to say something else. So I will wrap by saying that yes, we are indeed looking forward to more, to further strengthening of the system, operationalizing all the frameworks and the strategies and the procedures that we've spoken about. Financing is key, human resources is key, and coordination, because there's a lot of players we're looking at. So we have to strengthen coordination with all those players. And I wish you well moving forward, wishing you better results. And let's put St. Lucia on the map with ASP. And may your enthusiasm continue.
I mean, we are trendsetters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.